Andale, what's up with that? I'm in California, and this is a totally different setup. I'm in a little studio that Perry set up in his garage in Azusa, California, and everything is just a little bit out of sorts. And so, andale, I can't remember. Good morning, Reedy, Frankie, Lucas, Polly. It's great to see you. I hope you can hear me all right. Give me a thumbs up. Somebody give me a thumbs up that we're good to go. All right. Let me straighten this little camera out right here. All right. Yeah, that's a little straighter. Okay. Of course, I got my coffee. Can you hear me? We good? Somebody text me right now. I'm going to wait right now. Okay. All right. I don't know. Okay, there we go. I got the thumbs up. Okay. So it's a little different doing it from here, but it's great to be with family, with grandkids, and be in that bubble again. So I want to welcome you to the Community Wild Goose. I was thinking about leading up to Easter, and I've been getting it wrong all the time. I keep calling it Advent. A fellow minister, whatever you want to call it, pastor, whatever, Christian called me and asked me my thoughts on Ash Wednesday, and and I gave him a long description of what I did for Palm Sunday, which is totally different, and it turned into a Christmas thing, and before I knew it, and I just realized life is just kind of messy sometimes, and I started to think about how we try to order everything. We try to put things in succession, this, then this, then this, then this. And quite frankly, I do that to help my disorder, but I don't know that my natural sense of spontaneity and disorder will ever be completely healed. I'm a list maker only because I lose things that are in my head as they bounce around. So when I think in terms of the Lenten calendar and the leading up towards the crucifixion and the resurrection, I was thinking about how messy things can be in our life, that we just don't operate in that succession. If you think back to the time of Jesus, I don't think he was looking at his Lenten calendar and saying, oh, this is the moment in which I am persecuted. This is the moment in which I get crucified. This is the moment in which he was living life with full awareness that all things are possible in this process. And so we live our lives in the midst of it all. And I want to talk about how we do this. In my description of today, I wrote, why are we so intent to have a Lenten calendar? Following the days with precise order, getting the details and events of the story of Jesus' journey from life to death to resurrection so chronologically accurate that it can be put on the refrigerator next to the chore list. Sometimes life just isn't like this. Most of the time, one day can be filled with euphoria of the resurrection and then the downs of Good Friday, all in one day. Rebirth is when all of them, both the death, the resurrection experience, are embraced in one. And I think that I have been kind of getting a taste of that these last few months. That when we embrace them, eternity is touched. That sense of no beginning, no end, that oneness. I experienced it going to my mom's gravesite as we had the bench, like a piano bench type of deal. For us, it meant that, which was her life. And I was afraid to go down there. I was afraid to look at my own mortality by going to the cemetery. But there was some joy there as I got there and saw my mom's name and my dad's name there together. And I'm just not that type of person that is a regular cemetery visitor for my dad or for anything else like that. But as I stood there with my brother and my sister, I I just felt a sense of awe and a little bit of joy in seeing their names together, because I felt like eternity was touching that moment. I started to understand some scriptures that said we have a whole cloud of witnesses. In understanding not that there's these individual spirits that can be conjured up to speak to, but it is though God is one with those who have gone before us, in the eternal understanding of what is good and what is whole, and I can touch that. And it's as N.T. Wright says, the thin light between heaven and earth. And as I look at the story of the death of Jesus, fulfilling that need to be there for the godless, for the unjust, for those who have perpetrated injustices and need the forgiveness, all of us, that symbol of no more shaming, no more scapegoating, no more that we experience this death in this moment. But then a few days later, the resurrection, which is not just about the unjust and forgiveness for those who have done injustice, but is the rebirth of this life of oneness that all belong and everything belongs, both earth and human, both plant and animal, that it all is a part. And then you bring those together and put them in the messiness of today, and you begin to realize that with human hands, we mess with this natural flow of life, of earth, and our process of birth, physical birth, our own attempts to be God and manufacture this life, our dying to ourselves, and then this resurrection on earth, not the one where we're going to go to a place somewhere in the by and by and we're anticipating it, can't wait to get there. No, the thin line that brings us together with heaven and earth right now. For those who've experienced a euphoric experience of an awareness through love, love is the first invitation. Love is the first invitation to experiencing life. We have that love at birth. We have that love in different examples in this world and in our family and in the ones that we love. We experience this love. But then we experience this love of God, of something, of spirit, of something greater than myself. And for some, it is a religious experience of sorts. This joy is symbolized by being able to breathe freely for the first time. It gets you up, and it helps you to live a life with your head held high. That euphoria of something has happened, something has transpired. It's specifically experienced by those of us who have had loss in our early childhood, whether it be by being victims or having a loss of a parent or whatever, and it's as though God takes over and is one with us. It is both fathering and mothering us. And in that freedom, we experience that. Now all of a sudden we try to gain that life again. We're trying to maintain it, I should say. But then there is another experience, and that is that suffering that occurs, whether it be born out of disappointment or wrongs committed or hurts endured or the violence that goes on or even shadows of death and loss. And the resurrection is that which brings all things into focus. It's the rebirth, it's the recreation of not just the euphoria, but the touching of life through suffering. I don't know about you, but in those moments, man, do I experience God. And it's not in an audible voice or anything. It's just that solemn stillness of something greater, of being comforted. And it brings us into an understanding of our responsibility to bring justice into the world. That he sides with those who have been treated unjustly. That's the resurrection. That he brings new life in here. It's this way. Jürgen Moltmann puts it this way. As a community, we begin to love once more. Through the suffering, we begin to love once more with the love of God, which we experience in spirit. In the Old Testament, in Hebrew, it's described as a ruach. That spirit word is ruach, which is the life-giving, God's life-giving energy. And then it's combined with life's experiences and are bound up together in the things that we experience. That everything we experience is bringing life to that moment. You know, we learned it in the book. What was that little children's book about giving life to that stuffed animal? I feel foolish because I can't even remember the name of that book. Somebody typed that in, right? It's that thing you love so much, and the eye comes off, and whatever, and it's loved because of how worn and used it is. You see, it is given life. We give life to those things that we experience. It does not give life to us. When I talk to people about the jobs that they leave, I remember I've mentioned this several times before, but when I was with the Suns, and I thought that my identity was wrapped up in the suit I wore, the popularity that character was given, the income that was made by that, and then you go through that dark period of who the heck am I? And you think you can't relate, but you can. Whether you have a loss of relationship or a job change or whatever it is. If you put your identity in the relationship with another person and then that's gone, it's like, who am I? Who am I now? But what you have to remember, as I've told others, is I did not, the gorilla character, that suit did not make me. I made it. And when I walked away, I maintained all that I had and put into it. You could toss that sucker out on the court. It ain't going to dance. Whether you have created a vocation, an occupation for yourself, I should say, a life in a certain way, you poured into it. That idea of pouring that life into just the job title is like the ruach, the energy-giving life. It's as though God has given you that energy to come alive, and you give these things life around you. But when it turns and it twists, it's when we think that those things are giving us our identity, and we become lost. Yes, Holly, the Velveteen Rabbit, thank you. The Velveteen Rabbit, that story about this stuffed animal that gets like, yeah, that's my eloquence. You're welcome. But we give life. And that's what happens in the resurrection story, is that we understand that we have the ruach, not just in us, but in the world, in the cosmos, in community. And that every time we as a community and we as individuals reach out to the suffering and touch the horizon of their suffering, we are breathing the ruach into them, that energy-giving life. Whether you're driving and you don't have $1 to give to that homeless guy that's standing on the corner, and so you feel that shame and you don't want to look him in the eye because you feel like you don't have anything to give them, so you can't bear to see their suffering. Don't dismiss the idea that to make eye contact with them is to give them life, ruach. So this identifying with our suffering by that cosmic understanding of Christ to all people is life-giving in the midst of the suffering. So those two portals to intimacy that Richard Rohr speaks of, love and suffering, that love experience of the euphoric, romantic engagement with God, with life, with others. But also the suffering that draws us to the end of ourselves and causes us to fall into the arms of a loving, loving spirit that says, I got you. And then if we put it in chronological order, it's really great for the textbooks and for seminary, but it's just not the way I live my life. I can live the Good Friday and the resurrection euphoria all in one day. 1 minute, I'm waiting for the next bad news. The next minute, I'm celebrating the last good news. Isn't that true? But see, the good news in the gospel isn't about what news you're getting. It's about the life that you're living in the midst of both the good and the bad. And that's why the contemplative life is so important. For us to stop and be intentional about being present in that moment. Because that's what brings us peace into the restless hearts. That is the words of spirit, one ruach, another one the nafach, which is to blow, the spirit, which is to blow or to breathe into something and cause it to breathe out. So it's that communication with spirit where I inhale the breath of God and I exhale a thank you. How spectacular is that? That even in the midst of our sorrows, our difficulties, or our euphoric excitements and loves, that we are still breathing through it all and are experiencing the breath of God into us and the exhale of the breath out. We have that capacity to breathe that life in and to give life to that homeless person on the corner by making eye contact, by saying, I see you and I see your suffering. And then the neshama, which is both the breath of God, spirit, capital S, and the little s spirit that is residing with me, that longs to be one. That's what brings life to us and allows us to be animated. So we hold both the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection together as metaphors for this life of dying to ourselves in our own way and our own determination to be God, and understanding that that image of sacrifice is enough to swallow up any injustice that has been done to us or the injustice we do to others, that we might move on. But then there's that second part, and that's the resurrection that brings oneness with us to all of life. The ruach, that mighty wind, that breath that is breathed into us. Unfortunately, I don't experience that every moment. I don't know that you do. That constant euphoria. It's tough, isn't it? I would love to live on that mountain all the time. And yet if I do, I would miss out on that intimacy that takes place in the moments of our suffering and our helplessness. You know, a Buddhist thought is that we are not suffering. The suffering that we want to rid ourselves is the suffering that we are suffering. Okay? What I mean is that we suffer because the suffering we're having, we want to get rid of it. So since I'm wanting to get rid of it, and I'm focusing and preoccupied on it, and it creates that anxiety, that's the real genuine suffering. But when I embrace both the resurrection and the crucifixion together, the good and the bad in my life, and hold them in conflict, it's messy in this moment, but to be able to hold them together in those conflicts is to draw intimacy into the divine of this moment. I hope that's making sense. You see, I remember early on in my young married years when I was visiting a counselor, and she was describing to me this process of intimacy with both another human being and with God. And she drew on the board and she wrote, and I still use this with my clients to this day. There's a first column, and it is occupied by the word sameness. We want sameness. We think that if we can somehow get somebody to get it through their thick skull, if you could only see things the way that I see them, if you could only see life the way I see it, then we would be okay. We call it being on the same page. We don't like differences. We don't like something that's unfamiliar and uncomfortable, and we try to force it to become what we want it to be. That is the worst nature of Christianity, of religion in general, is that I think my way is the only way. Perhaps that's why Jesus said, the way, or I am the way. It was to draw us away from our way and to find that oneness that all are included and that all belong. I was playing with my little granddaughter, Charlie, and she has an incredible imagination, and she was telling me what game we were going to play, and she loves to make believe all these things, and she goes, okay, so Papa, here's the rules, and this is what we need to do, so we need to follow the rules. Okay, this is going to be like this, and you're going to be this, and we're going to do this, and this is how it's going to be. Now, we can both do what we want to do and have our way to do it the way we want to do it. So you can do whatever you want to do, and I can do whatever I want to do, but we're going to do it my way, okay? And I think that's what we kind of do with God, don't we? It's like, God, listen, I want to follow you and serve you, but I want to know what's going to happen and what's to come, and I don't want to live in the moment. I want you to give me some warnings on things, and I want you to give me the good side of things, and I want you to pat me on the back. But in the suffering and intimacy, we go to the next column. So in this one, we want sameness. We want to force sameness. We want to work towards sameness. Sameness is not peace. Like I was saying last week, there's a difference between peace loving and peacemaking. Peace loving is sitting at home saying that we all should love one another and write songs about it and sing about it, but not go into the difficult margins of the world of suffering where we see differences. To love our enemies, that's why Jesus said that. To love our enemies is to go to the uncomfortable place, and sometimes I'm my own enemy. And I must learn to love myself. So when we realize we cannot control those things outside of ourselves, and we begin to recognize those differences, we move into the second column, which is conflict. Because the pathway towards intimacy is through conflict. But if I try to be a conflict avoider, and what I mean by conflict, I don't mean fighting and punching and screaming and yelling. I'm talking about the conflict that, yes, we have with other people and ideas, but it's the discomfort that we feel in having that conflict. In that story of Jesus' walk from the crucifixion into the resurrection, it was a necessary chronological walk. Without death, there is no need for resurrection. There is this process, but in our lives, we experience all those in one moment, and we touch eternity in that moment because we come alive. So we move through that conflict and holding the conflict of two things that seem that they can't be held together. I never need to let go of love at the same time that I feel not love. I don't know if that made sense. But sometimes there's people that you genuinely love that you're so angry at in the moment, you're not feeling the love, but it doesn't take away the truth that you love. And you're able to say, I love. When you set a boundary, you can set the boundary with great fervency at the same time that you're screaming the words, I love you. But no, my drug addict son or spouse, no, I will not let you in the house, but I love you. I love you. To hold those two things in conflict are so difficult. And we do that with ourselves. I want this. I want this thing. I want you to look at things this way. But to hold those two things in conflict is saying that, you know what, I love you more than the conflict itself. And I need to learn how to embrace you as you are and as I think you ought to be. Do you see how much it flies in the face of our American evangelical Christianity that says that in order to be loved by God and belong, that you need to pray the abracadabra prayer and bring Jesus into your heart? No, this spirit that resides before our awareness from all of time, that brought things into life and is the God's energy, life energy flowing in and out of us, is always present in our spirit. but it is our awareness and our awakening that is brought about by love and the euphoria and suffering, the intimacy. Just think about relationships you've had where there was conflict and you didn't know how you were going to go through it. And what comes out of that conflict, you feel like you know that person more than you did before. And you enter into that moment of brokenness. And you think you're just both going to die, you're both going to never see each other again, that it's going to end the relationship if you enter into that conflict. But if we learn to embrace that, traverse through that conflict together, we have a story to tell. Yeah, we had a rough moment, but I can't believe we got through it. And we're closer than ever, not because, in spite of it, but because of it. Because we found ourselves embracing each other in our differences. And when there's resolution, there's euphoria. Do you see how it goes together? Both the suffering of life in intimacy and love together. And we hold those two in conflict. How beautiful is this? You know, in working with step families for many years, one of the things I realized in working with step families is it's the hardest thing in the world. You know why? Because everybody's right. Everybody's perspective is right. And they're trying to win the other one over to their side instead of being able to listen to the diverse understandings of the pain in their life and the love in their life and the thing they're really longing for, that everybody is right. And that's when I just threw up my hands with that whole aspect of step families and trying to get them to see things a certain. No, it's being able to embrace the differences, the inadequacies, the awkwardness as they are, and hold those all together. That life begins to develop in the beauty of it, not in spite of being different and having, but including. As they say, we transcend those differences and include. And when we can do that, the resurrection itself is what saves us from our need to make other people believe and to think and to change and to transform. Because now we possess with us the life-giving spirit, Ruach, that we too can breathe into others simply by saying you matter. You belong. That is the story of Easter that touches me, is that we can embrace both death and life together at the same time and hold those two things in conflict and know that that image of it being the cross and the resurrection says it's done. You can stop blaming others and blame yourself and be able to embrace this life that we have right now. How beautiful is that? So if you're having difficulty with the messiness of the right now, you might be caught in this COVID moment, this difficulty. Embrace also the joys. And if you're living in the euphoric moments of your life, notice the suffering and hold those together. And then as a community, when we reach out and we forgive and look at those injustices, we are bringing mercy of God through us in our physical bodies. No wonder Jesus said on that moment, forgive them. Forgive them. They don't know what the heck they're doing. I don't think he said it like that. But forgive them. They don't even know what they're doing. You notice he didn't pick it out and say, you know what, that one dude, he knows what he's doing. He's doing it on purpose, God. And that one, he's just dumb. He doesn't know what he's doing. He said, as human beings in your human condition, we just don't know what we're doing. I remember being so angry at somebody and frustrated with this moment one time. And I wanted to leave this retreat I was on. And in my quiet moment with God, I felt Spirit say to me, hey, dude, you know what? You're all just a bunch of effing human beings. What were you expecting? I don't care if you got a PhD or you think they're better than you are or they're worse than you are or whatever. You're all just a bunch of effing human beings. Well, then what do, God? I have compassion. Compassion on both myself and to others. And that's the fruit. That's the fruit of the conflict of holding both the death and the resurrection and the messiness of this moment, not in chronological order. And in that messiness, we bring that life of the moment right now that we touch eternity, that we all belong. And in all, it took fear away from me. It was so helpful to see that, to breathe in the Ruach of God in this moment. That the reason why I feel my pain, that the pains in the body or the suffering of the mind is for one very clear reason. When I'd sit in groups sometimes, I'd ask everybody who's in recovery, hey, I know you're going through a lot. Let's talk about the pains and the sufferings. Well, I have this physical pain and I have this anxiety and whatever. And I'm like, why do you think you're feeling all that? One of them would say, well, because I'm not working hard enough. I'm not turning it over to my higher power. I'm like, nope. The reason is because you're alive. Because if you weren't alive, you wouldn't be feeling these things. We celebrate the fact that you're alive, or else we will preoccupy ourselves with what might come. And we hold all of these things in conflict. So as we go further into this season, and we look at all these, go ahead and keep your calendar and read your contemplative prayers and devotionals as you lead in Easter. And it's so important to have a full awareness with that. But don't get down on yourself that you are all over the place throughout the day. You're human. You're human, or just a bunch of effing human beings who are able to do extraordinary things and join as co-laborers with God in bringing justice to the world and reminding others of life and helping those who have done unjust things to be forgiven. And we embody both the death and the resurrection. Have a great day.